Welcome to the Filmcast review of Borderlands. I'm going to read the plot summary of this movie from the internet. Returning to her home planet Pandora, an infamous bounty hunter forms an unexpected alliance with a ragtag team of misfits. Joining us for our conversation about Borderlands, he is the co-host of the awesome video game podcast, DLC, which, by the way, is also co-hosted by one of the Filmcast co-hosts, Chef Kanata, Christian Spicer. Welcome back to the Filmcast.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me back. I always love talking movies with you all, and I'm excited to follow in Tim's footsteps. Man, that was a fun episode, so I'm happy to, keep that energy going.
Absolutely. Well, we're glad to have you. Now,
very much looking forward to the song that you contribute to the show.
Yeah.
Oh, just wait. Me, 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 me. It's all in the voice of Claptrap, so get ready.
So anyway, let's start by talking about Borderlands. We have two veritable video game experts here with us today, which is quite a blessing. Let's talk about the Borderlands video games. I'm curious what your relationship has been to Borderlands as a video game, but also if you have anything to say about like Borderlands' place in the video game universe. Christian, you want to kick us off here?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've played all the Borderlandses, including the most recent Tiny Tina's Wonderland adventure. Tiny Tina's something, Jeff, what was it? Something like that.
Wonderland. I think it's just Tiny Tina's Wonderland.
Yeah. Wonderland. A really fun kind of spin-off offshoot that brought a lot of D&D kind of aesthetic to the game. I even played it on the PS Vita, the Borderlands 2 port on PlayStation Vita, which was not a good port, but it felt very cool to have at the time. And then Borderlands 3, the most recent in the franchise itself, I didn't love. I felt the humor felt outdated. It felt sophomoric in a way that hadn't grown up with the rest of us. And while the mechanics were still there, I didn't love what it was saying otherwise. But I think the franchise is an important one for games because I think it did so much in terms of the looter shooter genre that exists today. For folks that don't know, it's games like Destiny is very much that in the first person. And then it's kind of taking the Diablo approach, if folks know that game, where you're constantly getting new weapons, new gear, upgrading your character. And it brought that over to a first person shooter perspective, a game like Halo or Call of Duty. And so Borderlands kind of marrying those two genres together was incredible at the time. I mean, absolutely incredible. The amount of weapons you'd have in it, constantly leveling up, seeing the numbers flying off of enemy characters was very common in games like Diablo or action RPGs, but wasn't as common in these first-person shooters. And Borderlands doing that, it felt like a revolution. You see it in all sorts of games now, even games that aren't meant to be a collectathon the way Borderlands is. And it brought in this art style. Originally, it was debuted with this very brown Gears of War style graphic setting that kind of looked like the graphic du jour of the time, kind of uninspired. And then it went away for a bit and came back with this cell shaded cartoon comic book aesthetic that leaned into its sense of humor at the time. And it knocked people's socks off. There have been so many since then of Borderlands and a lot of half sequels and pre-sequels and all these expansions. But at the time, what Borderlands did, it can't be overstated how much it brought to the industry when it did.
Hey, Christian, did you play the Telltale Borderlands adventure game?
Oh, that was great, yeah.
Because supposedly that was the game that convinced Gearbox that this could be a movie.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's interesting. I started it. I don't recall. I think it was 5 chapters, and it was episodic, and I don't know if I finished it.
Yeah.
That was good stuff.
That I did not finish it, but I did play some of it.
Yeah. And looter shooter, just to further clarify what Christian was referring to, is essentially like you are this character, you kind of shoot enemies, take their weapons, increase your own abilities, you loot things, you find treasures and whatever. You basically like build up your character, and there's no like definite ending of the story necessarily in that series, right? You're just kind of like,
Borderlands has a campaign that has a beginning, middle, and end.
Right. Yeah. That's true. I did play Borderlands 3 with my brother, and that was really enjoyable because you're kind of going into this world together and shooting things and picking up bonuses. I guess, Jeff, I was referring more to the end game. Like after you're done with the campaign, you would still basically like continue to build your character over time. But I think some of the things that make these looter shooters really appealing feel like they would not necessarily translate well to movies, right? Like it's kind of this open world. You can choose your own adventure. You can decide where to go, and it's like that's literally the opposite of what a movie is like. Jeff Kanata, curious, like what your relationship to Borderlands has been, and if you have any thoughts on the
I
game.
have a vivid memory of sitting in a behind closed doors presentation for the first Borderlands before it had years before it came out, or maybe 2 years before it came out, when they were just had revealed it. It did not have the aesthetic change that Christian described, where it moved into this more vibrant color palette. But they were just showing the fact that this game is going to have hundreds of thousands of different permutations of a gun.
Yeah.
That was what they were hanging their hat on. And I remember walking out of that with the Toilet Rad Show guys at the time when we were doing that show and going, this isn't going to work. This game is going to flop. This is terrible. And because at that time, when you played a first-person shooter, there was the guns that you could get in the game, the weapons that you could get in the game were few. There were 8 maybe in the whole game.
Magnum, shotgun, AK-47, sniper rifle.
Yeah, it was very. It really was a different way of looking at it, and it just didn't seem like it was going to work out at all. And of course, couldn't have been more wrong. But the game went on to great acclaim. It's tons of fun. A great game in co-op. Big open world, goofy, post-apocalyptic. Very much a tongue-in-cheek world. And I do think it is worth noting the thing that I mentioned, which I had read somewhere, that the folks at Gearbox were reluctant to even do a Borderlands movie until they had done an adventure game, which is very much not the mechanics we're talking about, very much not a looter shooter. It is a story-based kind of choose your own adventure, dialogue-heavy experience. And I think that's an interesting, that game exists, that Telltale version of Borderlands exists because over time and sequels, the Borderlands universe was peopled with these wacky offbeat characters that were pretty memorable to a lot of people, like Tiny Tina and, these kind of wacky outsized, post-apocalyptic, very, very, very much taking cues from Mad Max and being larger than life and kind of grotesque in a certain tongue-in-cheek way. And I think that is ultimately what this movie is trying to create or trying to mine, not necessarily the mechanics of the base series, but the tapestry upon which that series is set.
All right. Well, let's get into the movie itself. I mean, I think it's safe to say our expectations for this one were set pretty low. The movie had a very low Rotten Tomatoes score. It was widely reported to be a disaster. Some people calling it the worst movie of the year. But Christian Spicer, is Borderlands really that bad?
Worst movie of the year, I cannot attest to. Folks that listen to DLC know when you do our favorite game of the year, it's always based on an incomplete sampling because we cannot play every video game. So worst movie of the year, incomplete sampling. I am a guest on a movie podcast. I am not a regular on a movie podcast.
Yeah, we're the experts here. We will be able to tell you. That's fair. I shouldn't have even asked you the question, Christian. That's my bad. But
I mean, again, expert podcast guest, working with an amateur podcast host, apparently. But we're gonna make it work. We're gonna make it work, David. So worst movie of the year, I cannot say. Disappointed. Pretty big disappointment, I will say. I wasn't going in with high expectations, but I like to hold out hope because I do think the universe is fun. The cast is a murderer's row of talent. And so I was holding out hope that it would rise above what the early chatter was suggesting it was. And for me, it did not rise above that early internet chatter. I left pretty disappointed in what I saw.
What disappointed you, Christian? What were you hoping for, or what do you think the movie didn't do well?
Great question. I think I should back up a little bit. I'm not trying to disparage anybody's work on the film. Whenever people critique something, it's like, well, people poured their heart and soul into this art. I understand that. I'm not trying to take anything away from that work that went into making this. So this is just my opinion and what I watched. But it looked to me like a fan film. The aesthetic, the costuming looked like incredible Hall H costume showcase, cosplay costumes. And I think the whole veneer of the film kind of had that look. The stuff on green screen or shot in the vault or however it was created. There's a action sequence where the character volume. Thank you. Where the characters look like Tobey Maguire, 2002 Sam Raimi Spider-Man, style of animation. There were constantly things that would pull me out of even this, big bombastic popcorn flick that just didn't feel put together in a way that was cohesive for the whole. So that was one. And then I thought the story was largely nonsensical, but also not fun enough to just be, good time. I just want to see crap get blown up. I don't care what's happening. Deadpool and Wolverine for me. Loved that movie, but the plot I didn't care about, right? It was fine, but I loved everything else about that movie. And Borderlands wasn't that either. So that plus a plot that didn't make sense, which maybe we can talk about in spoilers, just kind of left me feeling very flat about it. There was nothing for me to hang my hat on and be like, it wasn't funny. I don't know. There wasn't any there for me.
Yeah. Jeff, Kanata, can I go to you next? What did you think about Borderlands, the movie?
Well, Dave, I guess you could say what I thought about Borderlands, the movie, is best summed up in the form of a limerick.
All right, let's hear it, Jeff.
They all say this film is subpar, but I find that assessment bizarre. Where else can you get sci-fi Blanchett, a gun-toting Lydia Tarr? Here's how I would describe Borderlands. What if, in 1985, Meryl Streep played Red Sonja?
Sure. Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
That would be pretty interesting, right? I think that would, for me, that would be pretty interesting. The greatest actress of her generation, slumming it in a goofy genre thing, to me is inherently interesting.
Just that fact alone. Doesn't matter how she does in the thing.
I think she's incredibly watchable, and she is playing the part with gusto. I loved watching Cate Blanchett in this movie. I honestly did go in with very, very bottom of the basement expectations. So that I'm sure plays a large part in my take, but I kind of don't understand what everybody else was watching. I had fun with this movie. Claptrap.
I prepared myself for this.
Claptrap is legitimately funny. Jack Black as Claptrap is legitimately funny to me. I was laughing. There's several moments where I laughed out loud. I don't like. This movie's better than Rebel Moon? Hell of a lot better than Trap. There's like half a dozen movies that we all watched this summer that I think this movie is more fun than.
Better
it doesn't.
What's like? What are you saying? Better though?
It doesn't. It never
like
insulted my intelligence. It
really?
never. It
really?
does. It never.
Let him finish. Let him finish.
I was having a good time. Is it goofy? Yes. Are the games goofy? Is the source material goofy? Yes. It's I feel like I'm going to be saying all the things you said to me during Trap to you. Like the point, what you think are flaws is the point. Like that's what it's attempting to be. It's attempting to be this B movie, and it just happens to have A+ actors doing that, which I find to be incredibly compelling. Like the greatest actor of her generation is what I consider Cate Blanchett to be, or among the greatest actors of her generation.
Sure.
Give her subpar material. Sure. I'm not going to argue that this is Shakespeare. I'm not going to even argue it's, a great movie, but it's pulpy and it doesn't take itself seriously at all. It's having a good time. It's being goofy. There's a urine field in this movie. Like it's not trying to, it's embracing its B moviness in the same way you guys told me Trap did. And I had fun. I laughed. I loved watching an actor like honestly, when I heard Cate Blanchett was going to be in this movie, I thought, oh man, that's going to be a really cool 10 minutes of this movie. She's going to Galadriel the shit out of this movie, But no, she's the main freaking character. She's in almost every frame of this movie. And she's there like putting in the work. And I'm down for it. So I know I'm going to be the lone voice of, hey, I had a good time. I'm not arguing that this is better than Furiosa or Fallout, the TV show, or any of the other, sort of comparable experiences even this year. It's not as good, but you could do a hell of a lot worse. And I did not feel like my hour 47 or whatever it was wasted. I really smiled enough to give this one a fairly positive review.
Wow. I was with you through the Cate Blanchett stuff, by the way, Jeff, just to be clear. And then I kind of jumped off the train. I want to read a quote that Cate Blanchett gave about why she took this role. I thought it was just very vivid. She says, the gunslinging stuff was so much fun. I got really absorbed in that whole world. Like she went and played all the video games. I think there also may have been a little COVID madness. I was spending a lot of time. I was spending a lot of time in the garden using the chainsaw a little too freely. My husband said this film could save your life. End quote. I just like the idea of Cate Blanchett in her garden with a chainsaw and her husband being like, maybe you got to get back to work, honey. Like
Lydia, come back. Yeah. That is what I think is the most fun for me about this whole thing. And I tried to express it, but maybe a better way of saying it is that she's not phoning it in.
No, I don't think so.
She's there 100% in this movie. And like, that's a cool thing to see, I think. Anyway, I'll let everybody else talk, but for me, that was enough.
Devindra Hardwar, what did you think about Borderlands?
I'm still trying to reassess what just happened.
I know. I'm
the last
also
5
kind
minutes
of
on this podcast.
Well. Also, it's our instigators conversation all over again, basically.
Yeah, basically, except that was like a middling. Fine, there's a thing you guys could disagree on. Not aiming for the star. It doesn't sound like the worst movie ever made, right? Like I can understand the disagreement there. God damn, Jeff. Why would you do this to us?
Hey, it's like presumed innocent, right? Right, Devindra?
It is totally like presumed
innocent. We're
innocent.
brothers in good taste, right, Devindra?
No, I feel like one of the people that wants to destroy Jake Gyllenhaal in presumed innocent right now. No, like I think the idea when we saw the casting initially, Cate Blanchett starring Borderlands, that's interesting. I would love to see her in a genre movie. I hope she's not phoning it in. I hope she gets a lot of fun stuff to do. And I don't think she gets to do that, guys. Like, and it may just be because she just has not had enough time to be in roles like this, but I can think of actors who can jump into a genre piece and sell you trash and have a lot of fun doing it. I'm thinking of like Angelina Jolie in a movie like Salt. She's having fun. She knows what she's doing. I totally buy her as Salt. Okay. Cate Blanchett sounding like I know the character Lilith. I know she's supposed to sound like she's over all this shit. She's a little world weary. Yeah, she's bored with the world and everything. There's a balance between that and actually being bored. And actually being bored of where you are. And that's kind of what I got from her. I got that honestly from the trailer too. And I was hoping that the movie would be a little better. But it isn't really. Like, I wrote a review for Engadget. And I think like the main takeaway I had is like, this is a huge waste of potential. Yeah, the idea of Cate Blanchett starring in a Borderlands movie could be cool if it was directed by somebody who had like any idea of what they were doing. I think this movie really confirmed to me that Eli Roth is just a bad storyteller. I don't like his movies in general. And we have talked about him for so long. Everyone's like, oh man, this Eli Roth guy, his Hostel movie, crazy movie, super talented guy. I never really liked Hostel. He became kind of a voice in the horror like community. Like he has stuff on Shudder. Like he is a voice. He's a presence. I liked him in Inglourious Bastards as like that as a character in Inglourious Bastards. But there is very little like decent storytelling in this movie. And what really disappoints me is that it just feels so lazy. Like you have Kate Blanchett in a crazy gunslinger role like this, and you're just not doing much with it. The action is boring as hell. Everything she's saying, she's supposed to sound bored, but it's not even like entertainingly bored. We've seen characters like this all the time. Doesn't really make sense. Kevin Hart as pretty much the straight man in this movie. Why would you even do that?
It's an odd choice. That I
Why
agree.
would you do that?
That is
Kevin
weird.
Hart is the most baffling thing about this movie.
At
to
least
me.
let him be like he could be a good claptrap. I didn't need another Jack Black, like, you know, in a video game thing. He could have been claptrap. I think it feels like every choice made in this movie just feels incredibly lazy and misguided. I don't think Eli Roth has a sense of like what to do with this world. He's not like coming into this as like a big Borderlands fan or something, because he probably would have respected it a little more. The script is a complete mess. Like the fact that one person took their name off of it, like the story is Craig Mazin, showrunner of The Last of Us and Chernobyl, like did a script, took his name like off of this project entirely. We don't know exactly who's behind the script. Doesn't feel like Craig Mazin's work though. It feels like it feels like something just hacked up to an insane degree. Like if you're going to be a cool, I don't know, buddy romp comedy sci-fi thing, like you should, the characters should be fun. The characters should be interesting. We have characters who just appear. They run into a character. Oh, I guess you're in our party now for the rest of the movie. Are you going to have any dialogue? Are you going to like have any sense of growth or personality? No, you're just a big guy who's here because they're in the games and he's here now and he's helping us on this journey. Like this, nothing really makes sense in this movie. I wish the action was more interesting. I wish like the set design was interesting. I wish it looked cooler. I wish the costumes were better. What the hell is Jamie Lee Curtis doing in this movie? I don't know. It is just like a complete waste of time and potential because you got all these good pieces. So yeah, I actually feel bad, Jeff, when I see Kate Blanchett in a role like this, because she could be doing so much more, or at least like if in better hands, she could like they could have found the potential of what she could do here. I think of a movie like the Dungeons and Dragons movie that we talked about from, was it last year? That is how you kind of do this. With
Fun
an
movie.
understanding,
Yeah.
fun movie, understanding of the material, fun characters. You want to see them hang out. This movie has kind of none of that. It just feels lazy on every level to me. So I'm glad you enjoyed it, Jeff, but my God, man. My God.
I do think the script was, I don't have any evidence for this, but it does feel like the script was taped together.
Oh,
Kate
yeah.
Blanchett has a long narration at various times that
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily, it doesn't seem to be like it's trying to be that genre of film where you have a lot of lead character narration. I imagine in a version of the script, the character of Roland was different than how he's portrayed. I also think the character of Knox had more substantial screen time than how they were portrayed. It does feel like there was something bigger here or very different that then they made into this, whatever it was, 90, 100-minute movie.
And it's PG-13, feels like it should be an R-rated movie. If you really want to like let your freak flag fly with this whole thing, should be R-rated. This movie lost me early on when Kate Blanchett is narrating things happening on the screen. When a movie is doing that, I went to this place, I talked to these kids. We see her going to a place talking to the kids.
That
They
was
tell her
weird.
what to do, and then she immediately says again the narration's like, you're talking about not trusting our intelligence, Jeff. Like that is the red flag of just like, oh, you can't. The movie, the producers or whoever is not even allowed to like even let the movie sit and breathe and just watch us have the characters have dialogue and have those scenes play through. You gotta narrate the scenes as well, just to make sure people understand. It's baffling. Everything about this movie is baffling. I will say this: I didn't hate it as much as Rebel Moon.
Thank you.
We can agree on
Ultimately,
that.
Devindra agrees with me.
It's like high five, but with just our pinkies, right, Jeff?
I
Yeah.
haven't seen Rebel Moon, so I'll
Oh,
throw
boy,
that out there
Christian.
as well. Yeah.
But
So-
it doesn't. That's the thing. I think that the reason I'm pushing back on the just tidal wave of hate that seems to be crashing down upon this movie, I can't dance on its grave, even though it is a massive flop at this point. I can't dance on its grave because I really don't think it is as egregious as everyone makes it out to be. I don't think it's as egregious as, for example, the second Rebel Moon movie, which is just an atrocious affront to everything that you expect from a competent film. This,
Sure.
I feel like this is exactly what Dave described Instigators as early in this episode. It's completely inoffensive to me. It's a perfectly cromulent film. And I know you guys don't think it hits that bar, but for me, I was like, I kept waiting for it to shit the bed. I kept waiting for it to do something that was somehow so much more egregious to raise it to this like worst movie of the year status. And it's just not that dumb. It's not great. I'm not saying I loved the experience, but I had a fine enough time. That's all I'm saying. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah. Devindra, first of all, well-delivered rant. You're forcing me to use a phrase that I hope to never, ever use again in the rest of my life, which is the following. In defense of Eli Roth, this movie was filmed in 2021. Like, it wrapped in June of 2021 during COVID, and then had reshoots in January or early 2023, directed by Tim Miller, because Eli Roth was working on Thanksgiving, which, by the way, I've heard, great movie. Haven't seen it yet, but I've heard that that's actually a pretty solid horror film.
It's pretty wild that everybody on the set of Borderlands could have turned to Jamie Lee Curtis and went, "You're going to win an Academy Award." And she would have been like, "What?" By the time this movie comes out, you will be an Academy Award winner.
Right?
What?
Right. She won an Academy Award between the time when the movie was finished and when it released. And then, during 2023, also Craig Mazin removed his name from the project. So who knows what has happened in that time? What kind of studio meddling there has been?
Sure.
I have to imagine that this was not Eli Roth's original vision. Now, that said, who knows if his original vision was any good? I think that, per what Christian was saying, one of the big issues with this movie is the voiceover really indicates some of the movie's big shortcomings. So for those who don't know, the movie opens with this big voiceover by Cate Blanchett, basically introducing the premise of the games. It's like, there's these vaults and they have treasures in them and all this other, and it's like a very, very clunky.
Also, we're about the alien world Pandora, but not that Pandora. This is another Pandora. Right. Okay.
Yeah, it's
they don't eat your eyes like jujubes here. That's different.
It is extremely clunky. It feels like they just shove in all this kind of plot into this voice, and it's like, I can't imagine that was the most elegant way to communicate all that stuff. And the problem is that that's kind of what the movie hangs its stakes on, is like this whole vault idea and them getting into the vault and whether they get into the vault and what they find in the vault. And without going to spoilers yet, I'll just say that it does not play out in a very satisfying way. And so I think, like, it feels like, as Christian said, a script that feels taped together, that feels like, 18 people had a shot at like editing this thing and taking stuff out and putting stuff in. And what we have is a final film that's basically just nothing, right? It's, I would agree with Jeff to the extent that I think it's inoffensive. I'm not like, and we've seen this happen before, where sometimes it feels like the press and the public smell blood in the water and they just converge on a movie. Sure, and there's like a dog piling. Yeah. Now, Devindra, I'm not taking away from everything you said, which I think is heartfelt and like comes from your genuine reaction. But I do feel like there is a like dog piling of,
certainly it's fun. It's fun to troll on Borderlands. That is what a lot of people are doing right now. But it's not as if this movie is innocent. That's all I'm saying.
That's the thing is I would not describe it as a good movie. And I think
and people love the Borderlands games. Like, that's the other thing too. Like, it's not just being a bad movie. It's not, Rebel Moon can just be a bad movie and it's its own original thing. And I don't have any attachment to those characters or that world or anything. But a lot of people, myself included, have spent a lot of time in this world. You guys brought up the Tales of the Borderlands stuff. I totally forgot that existed, but I loved that series. Like, it was a really well-directed, really well-written way of approaching the Borderlands universe. Like, they should have just adapted that. Like, if you had adapted that, that would have been a thing. That would have been something interesting. And that was a great way to bring in new players too.
Before we get to spoilers, I guess I just want to ask you guys, is there anything, specifically Devindra and Christian, like, is there anything you think this movie did particularly bad or adapted from the video games in a particularly bad way? You know what I'm saying? Like, what is it that was from the games that you think to yourself, oh man, I wish they had done better honor to that component of the games that you don't feel is represented here?
I mean, you go ahead, Christian.
Yeah,
'cause I've
Christian.
got a few.
I write a newsletter about video games, christianspicer.substack. They're very conversational. And I'm thinking about writing a longer piece about this because I think this is an excellent question. And I wonder if video games are currently better adapted into TV shows than movies. I've been fortunate to be a guest on this show a couple of times, and usually it's for video game movies that aren't that great. There's been some video game movies that are great, but so far we kind of still live in the world where the video game movies aren't fantastic, and the video game TV shows recently are knocking it out of the park.
Right.
And I think the biggest offense, quote unquote, that this movie does to the video games is it doesn't spend enough time in the world. So much of what I find enjoyable about the Borderlands world and universe is the amount of time you spend there with these characters. And Claptrap, goes on this bell curve of being like barely noticeable to, oh my gosh, kill me now, you are so annoying, to now this is funny because it's been around for so long. And, you ride this wave of emotion with these characters. And
right.
even
you play
Lilith
these
as a
games for
character.
you play these games for like 30, 40, 50 hours sometimes, right? So it's like you're in this world for a really long amount of time. Anyway, go
and
ahead.
oftentimes, as you played Borderlands 3, Dave, with a buddy, Borderlands, I use this term a lot on DLC, I think is a perfect golf game. A game where you and your friends are hanging out, chit-chatting. You can miss pieces of the story because you're there for the vibes. You're there for the world. You're there for all the gear you're getting. And I don't think this movie had enough of that. I think the Fallout TV show had that in spades. It lived in that world and in that vibe. In this movie, for whatever reason, it shortcuts you in. It doesn't explain what everything is. It kind of alludes to all these weapons with, I'm blanking on the actor's name, but the weapon dealer who also is the bus driver. It kind of alludes to all that stuff, but you don't have the fun of the games, I think, is missing from the movie. And so that to me felt like the biggest, I wish it did this, and it doesn't.
It reminded me of a time where you just didn't give a crap about like the stuff from the games. It reminded me of like earlier eras of adapting.
Right.
These
It felt like something that would be come out in like the 80s or 90s. Right, like
basically
the Super Mario Brothers movie, or like where the people are like, oh, we gotta sanitize this for the masses. Borderlands, the video game's too edgy for the masses, so we gotta
people can't see other Vault Hunters going around or something. They can't really spend time with the psychos, or let's just see like thousands of guns. That's not a hard you can demonstrate some of that stuff in a movie, I'd say.
I'd say it a little differently. I don't think you guys are wrong about that. I'd say it slightly differently in that I don't think the world as depicted in this film is distinct enough and interesting. I already sort of mentioned the urine field sequence, which I think is the most interesting part of the world as shown, right? They do some interesting stuff with the psychos. There's a really, I thought, pretty fun sequence with the psychos. But like, it really doesn't take time to show me why this world is different from Mad Max or Fallout or any of the other myriad, post-apocalyptic desert wastelands that we see depicted in media. And that's a shame. Now, do I think the video games do that particularly well either? I don't know. I mean, I think the characters are fun in the video games, and I think some of the characters are fun in this movie for me. But I do think that ultimately Borderlands' identity as a post-apocalyptic wasteland isn't particularly distinct. So I don't know if the source material would have even helped find that for this movie. I just wish I do think it's a problem that the place that we are in here feels so generic. And I do think that's a problem.
I think people make the place.
Yes.
I think and that's Fallout, right? Fallout is a post-apocalyptic wasteland, and it doesn't really mean anything without
I don't
the
know.
ghouls and the Brotherhood of Steel and those characters that you get to meet and spend a lot of time with, and when you're playing the game, adventure and discover yourself. I think the game world, yes, it's set on this basic premise of Pandora is this wasteland, but again, it's the characters, and I think it's zanier than Mad Max, the vending machines, all the other Vault Hunters that you interact with, the evil warlords. It's like Mad Max turned into a cartoon, even bigger. and then with very in your face humor. And I think as you spend time with those personalities, that's where it becomes special.
Well, I'd push back on that and to just say that Fallout is interesting because it's what if it's 1950s version of the future as a post-apocalyptic wasteland. That already is more interesting. That like you are in this place that has an identity in and of itself. It's Ozzy and Harriet done with high tech, the vision, world of the future. It's world of the future. And so we're already in this distinct thing that has identity. So I would push back that Fallout doesn't have that, because I think it does.
At the very least, the Borderlands games were funny. The first one certainly was really funny. I think it kind of distinguished itself with decent writing at a time where video game writing, especially video game humor, was not as intelligent, I'd say. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's one of the big issues with this movie. It's clearly kind of aspiring to be a Guardians of the Galaxy style.
Right.
Oh, look at this band of misfits that's thrown together by circumstance, and the chemistry just doesn't really work, in my opinion. Like that's the issue. If like the chemistry is great between these characters, and I found it believable and charming, I think I would be able to overlook a lot of the movie's problems. But fundamentally, I just don't think it works particularly well, and it's hard to define what it is about it that doesn't work. But it's just like, yeah, something up with the script or the chemistry between the actors. I'm not sure, but whatever the case, it doesn't really come together. Anyway, go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I don't disagree with that either. I think that there's literally Kevin Hart is, I don't know what he's doing in this movie. I think he's trying to prove that he can be sort of just a leading man,
right?
But what is even his character doing in this movie?
Right.
I don't know. The only thing I'll push back on is I do think there is for me, there was a fun dynamic between Jamie Lee Curtis and Cate Blanchett. I liked that their interplay. They had a couple of scenes where they were doing back and forth, and Jamie Lee Curtis is doing a very, stylized character. And I don't know. I had fun with it. And I thought the young woman who played Tiny Tina,
Irina Greenblatt's great.
Is great.
She is fun.
And they like made her zany and fun in a zany, fun way. And she's got this, big, dumb, silent sidekick. Agreed. Much more could have been made of that character, and we could have known literally anything about it. There's a moment where its mask breaks, and I was like, "Oh, are we going to find out something about?" No, but yeah. So I don't disagree with that. Another shortcoming, a movie that has many shortcomings, but I did think there were some dynamics that were interesting enough.
All right. Well, let's get to spoilers for Borderlands starting right now. We're in spoilers for Borderlands right now. I think one of my issues with the ending of this movie is the whole thing about Cate Blanchett being the chosen one, and then like the wings coming out, and so on. I thought the whole sequence didn't look very good. It looked like it was all shot on green screen or the volume, and then they go inside the vault, and I'm like, what is this? And it's all these treasures, but it's so abstract that none of it really makes any kind of emotional impact. Jeff Kanata, I'm curious how you felt about the ending of the movie.
I mean, I guess I didn't have as violent a reaction as you to that. I do think it's not a strong ending. The thing that bothered me the most, honestly, is that at the very, very end, when like fireworks are going off, it's like, who's celebrating this thing that no one would know about? What is that
thing that, like, I think they're supposed to have built up the Atlas guy as this kind of big bad, and the fact that he's dead, everyone's celebrating. But it's like the movie does none of that work, right?
No, I agree with that.
To lay that track,
it's not a great ending. I just didn't jar me enough to hate the movie. I thought, all the stuff of Cate Blanchett being the chosen one, and the daughter of the planet or whatever it is, saw it coming a mile away. Obviously, right? It's pretty clear. So, it's not great. But again, there's some fun stuff that happens. I don't know. I just didn't hate it enough to hate it. I just thought it was a pretty pat, predictable ending that, is par for the course for a sort of B-level, middling sci-fi movie. And I had enough fun. Honestly, I had enough fun along the way with Claptrap and with Cate Blanchett and with Jamie Lee Curtis to forgive its shortcomings to much more than you guys. I see them. I'm not blind to this movie's shortcomings. I don't think it's a great movie. I just honestly, I'm here to say I don't think it's the worst movie ever made, and I honestly don't think it's devoid of fun and joy. Like, I had a good time. I laughed at some of its gags. I keep coming back to that urine field thing. I thought that was pretty
like
clever.
1 minute, Jeff. It's 1 minute of this movie.
But there's like tons of. I thought the raid on the psychos was fun, and Claptrap having to go in and
sure
be a distraction.
Honestly, I think there's a new litmus test for this movie. It's called the Claptrap test, and whether you found Claptrap to be funny or charming will dictate whether you like this movie. I did not laugh a single time at Claptrap for the entire movie, so
perfectly fine.
I
but
thought
yeah,
the CG was actually very good on Claptrap. I thought it was very convincing, but I was in a packed theater. No one laughed the entire film.
Yeah,
it was brutal.
Jeff, you brought up Trap in relation to this movie. Let me tell you something, Jeff. Watching Trap, my audience is like in tune, in sync with what is going on with this movie. Yeah, there's a lot of stupid shit. Yeah, some things don't make sense, but the audience was eating it up because we're like, this is a great experience. I not a very full screening of Borderlands, but I was struck by just the dead silence. The dead silence throughout the entire movie. And then ended.
Yeah, it's true.
I got up, I looked around, and it's just a lot of geeks. Just like either like getting ready to get the hell out of there or like just abject disappointment. Just like you could see it on their faces. Like, what did you do to my boy? It's kind of what I'm feeling like here. I can see how you're comparing it to Trap, but I do feel like there is an intention there to build like a sort of heightened reality. And I think at the very least, as an artist, as a creator, like Shyamalan, like is in tune with what he's doing there and is in tune with like what an audience wants, I guess. I didn't feel like any aspect of this movie, the action. I wish Cate Blanchett was more. I wish Jack Black's dialogue was funnier. I wish Jamie Lee Curtis had more to do. It all felt like a whiff on every single level. Like I guess that's the big difference there. Like, I don't feel like Eli Roth was in control of this thing. Maybe it's not entirely his fault, but also I went back and I thought, how many Eli Roth things do I actually like? Turns out none of them.
Wow.
Maybe Knock Knock. There is Knock Knock, which was a lot of fun, but that's it. This guy's been around for a while, so I don't know. I felt like nothing, and the lack of emotion that I felt, I think that to me was just very telling. Like I would have loved more.
I gotta say, I did have fun. Like, we don't really get to see Cate Blanchett in this mode very much.
We never get to see her in this mode. Yes,
like Ragnarok,
maybe Indiana Jones,
right?
You know,
Indiana Jones or
Thor
Ragnarok, right? But if this is the price we have to pay to watch Cate Blanchett kick ass, I don't pay it gladly. But I pay
this is my point.
Yeah,
but it's not. You just mentioned 2 other movies where she does it that are good movies. It's literally not the price.
Not the Indiana Jones one, maybe, but at least I would rather rewatch that, Crystal Skull rather than wherever the hell is going on.
The re-release they did of that on Disney Plus that fixed up the CGs. It's an improvement.
Really? Okay.
Christian, go ahead.
Let me ask you something. My co-host, my longtime friend, my pal, my buddy. Did you laugh at Claptrap?
No.
Not once? Dude, no. I was laughing the first moment he pops out and he's like, I'm supposed to be super polite to you, but Jeff, you're a terrible person. I thought
Jeff,
that was all fun stuff.
When you were defending Claptrap earlier, you might not have heard Christian said, "Oh, Jeff."
Yeah.
Which was also my inward reaction.
Laughed, man. I thought he was funny.
For folks who also don't know, I did stand up for about a decade, a bunch of college tours. I was fortunate to tour internationally. I got to feature for some great headliners, and I got to headline some smaller clubs. I had some.
And you were a robot for like 6 months.
I was a robot for about 6 months. I'm not saying that everybody loves my comedy. I'm not saying that everybody saw me love my comedy. Comedy is hard, and I feel like where this movie made a mistake, and I'd love to go through some other spoilery problems I had with the film. But where this movie, I think, made the mistake in comedy is that it tried to release the tension by having the characters hate the comedy, and that allowed me to hate the comedy. Everybody on screen hated Claptrap. No one was happy he was there. No one was laughing at his jokes. It was, oil and water and it never mixed right. And that's how the jokes landed to me. It's like, oh, this is tonally incorrect for this moment. This isn't supposed to be happening when he's pooping out the bullet shells in and of itself.
Yeah, they sent him in to die in that scene. It's like, hey,
gladly, right?
Yeah,
like,
just go die. F you, Claptrap. Bye-bye.
Yes. And I feel like that moment alone where he's like pooping out the shells, is that objectively, can that be objectively funny? Oh, I mean, yes, of course.
That's not the moment that I thought was funny, to be clear.
Jeff's favorite
that was one of
moment.
the highlights of Claptrap.
Jeff's favorite moment when he poops out the shells. But even then, they're not in on it. So it's not fun to watch. It feels like friction. And so that's how it felt to me. I wasn't laughing at those moments.
Okay, but the friction is part of the joke, because the whole setup of Claptrap is, I know you're making a mistake leaving me behind. Hey, everybody, I'm still back here. That to me is the funny thing, is this like lack of self-awareness, which is a classic trope for comedy of the thing that like, you guys are supposed to all love me. That I was laughing when he first showed up. And I will tell you, the guy next to me in the seat next to me was also laughing.
Jeff's
Laughter
laughter
is
is
Laughter is contagious.
What we're learning is that Jeff's laughter is contagious. I think a great comparison, Jeff, is honestly the Fallout robot.
Yeah.
Like the Fallout robot in the show Fallout is like hilarious in my opinion, because there's something that's really self-aware about Claptrap as a robot in this movie, right? Of like, oh, like he knows that is the role he is playing, and that releases the tension in a way. It's not quite what Christian's saying, but like along those lines. Whereas the robot in Fallout is completely oblivious. The robot in Fallout is like, oh, like I'm just here to do a job, like a normal robot, and that's where the humor comes from. Is like, But anyway,
my read on Claptrap in this movie, and maybe I'm filling in gaps that the movie wasn't putting in, but I thought the premise of Claptrap in this movie is, my programming says that I have to be your loyal servant, but I, a complicated AI that has a personality, recognize what a terrible person you are. So I have this internal conflict that to me was very funny. They're like, I have to do everything you want me to do, and everything that will help you, but I hate every second of it because you are awful. Like that to me is a funny comedic premise that I thought the movie did a good job articulating.
But awful based on whom? Because the whole Cate Blanchett is actually probably better than anyone else on this planet that Claptrap would otherwise meet. I feel like
it's so true.
I feel like, again, as you were talking, Jeff, yeah, to answer Dave's opening question, no, probably not the worst movie of the year. Certainly not the worst movie ever made. In my head, it's maybe, I'm not trying to pick a fight here with anybody, but it's maybe like a Red Notice or whatever that Netflix movie was with like The Rock and Gal Gadot. And it's like, I watched it. It's like, yeah, that was a thing and whatever. But like from Go, and I do feel like it's probably script or Devindra, as you mentioned, notes, some meddling happening. But like from Go, we see Roland, Kevin Hart's character, breaking out Tina from this prison with no real reason why he's trying to break her out. He shows some affection for Knox, this other person in his unit who gets knocked out, but then he leaves her there and he takes Tina to go do this thing that we later learn is to try to open this vault. And there's a moment where I feel like Jamie Lee Curtis, it's not breaking the fourth wall, but kind of talks to us about it. Or maybe it's Atlas telling, I forget if maybe it's Atlas telling Cate Blanchett, like, oh, she's going to die when you use her as this key. And there's a line where it's like, I think it is Jamie Lee Curtis who says, so wait, Atlas was going to use her to open this thing and she's going to die. And now instead you're going to use her to open this and she's going to die. And Jamie Lee Curtis is like, Tannis, Dr. Tannis, or whatever her character name is like, better us than him. And it's like, so you broke her out of this prison because her father was going to use her as this key and kill her. And now you broke her out of this prison to use her as this key and kill her. It just, nothing kind of
new information that they arrived at.
Tannis always thought she was going to die.
Yeah, Tannis always knew that information.
And she was the researcher that
Kevin
they
Hart
needed to
didn't
get.
know that. Kevin Hart's the one that broke her out. He didn't know that.
But I also don't know if he cared. He broke her out to open her, to use her as he wasn't trying to save her, it seemed like.
Their position is, can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs. Their position is, we can't let whatever's in this vault fall into the hands of the bad guys. We got to let, and when they discover that she has to die, it's a sacrifice for the greater good. Now, listen, I find myself doing the Dave Chen thing, where it's like, I hate that I'm in the position of defending this middling to bad movie, but I don't think it's as bad as you guys make it out to. That's all I'm saying is it's just not the bottom of the barrel. There's some fluid in that barrel, and that fluid is urine from the urine fields.
But it's we can't let these weapons get into the wrong hands. They open the vault, and inside is a bunch of floating rocks.
I agree. That's not.
And
fair.
this creature that lives there that apparently
and
Cate Blanchett, Lilith knows about as she evolved, and then when they Commander Knox, I have to think it's just played for laughs. She's like, what? Because she's the antagonist, like, of the unit that Kevin Hart's character Roland is part of, and they're like at odds. She fires missiles at all of them to try to kill them constantly through the movie, and then at the very end, when Atlas is like, "Yes, kill them," she's like, "No, wait, I no longer want to kill you," and she stands with Roland and then is immediately killed. And like,
I now have a moral compass.
Why does that happen? And Tanis, Dr. Tanis, Jamie Lee Curtis's character tells Lilith, Cate Blanchett, she's like, "Oh, wait, now I know why your mom gave you to me, is to keep you as far away from here as possible." Cut to 30 seconds later, that isn't the reason. Like, that's not what. So it's like a false realization that doesn't pay off, because she clearly was supposed to open this thing. She's the planet's savior. And Jamie Lee Curtis has this false, "Oh, now I know it's to keep you out of here," which she didn't. Like, nothing starts, I think, in a way that sets up the dominoes, and at the end, the dominoes just kind of scatter instead of being knocked over in a satisfying way. So I found moments to be engaging, the individual pieces never coalesce. And even the fight with the psychos, they run away, they get in this elevator, it's life or death, we got to get this elevator up. And Roland sacrifices him, "Go, I got you." And then cut to Roland survives. And how did he survive? Apparently he just shot the shit out of him. Like, that was one person shooting them all the time.
He used the exploding stuffed animal, to be fair.
But then they kept coming. They kept coming after that. That was wave one. Then a whole other wave knocked him OS, and it cut back, and he gets up from under their bodies.
Yeah, so I think that's a really, solid case against the movie. But I think people understand our views on this. Like, Jeff has done a good job of explaining some of the simple pleasures of the film, and I think we've also articulated some of the things that bothered us about the movie. And I suspect that some people will actually fall into Jeff's camp about this one, and we'll see how...
The guy next to him at the theater.
This is the guy next to him at the theater. But yeah, I agree with everything Christian said. There's a lot of problems from the script level, and nothing seems to make sense. And honestly, it really just feels like the result of a bunch of studio meddling, where we have these subplots that never paid off. And like, why is this paying off in this way? And it doesn't make any sense. Why is everyone celebrating at the end? Like, that's the biggest sign, is like, there was all this storyline that wasn't told. It's so odd.
That was very dumb.
So,
that was very dumb. So, they're sitting there watching fireworks go off, and I'm like, what?
It's meant to evoke, right, like Return of the Jedi or something, right? But it's like, there's nothing there. There's no story there. Anyway, despite literally everything we've just said, at the end of the day, it is impressive that Eli Roth and Joe Crombie, who is the co-credited screenwriter on this movie that apparently does not exist in real life.
It's not Craig Mason's pseudonym, because he said it wasn't him. So that's somebody else.
So I feel like that's doubly impressive. It's doubly impressive when a non-existent entity makes a movie.
It's impressive.
I think we got to give it even more of a shot.
It's kind of a thing where it's like, I didn't know that was even allowed to happen still, but anyway, it's impressive that Eli Roth and Joe Crombie, the
Can I like disavow your statement though?
Okay.
I don't think it's impressive that he made this movie.
It is impressive.
I don't think there's anything praiseworthy here about other than Eli Roth being like, I have some pull and I can do a video game thing. Like,
at the end of the day, it's impressive that Eli Roth and Joe Crombie, it's impressive to some of us that Eli Roth and Joe Crombie made a movie. Thank you so much for watching this video of the Filmcast. Check out these other videos that we have available, and be sure to hit like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to get other videos from us in the future.
You can also go to thefilmcast.com to catch all of our audio podcast versions of all of our episodes.
And support this podcast at patreon.com/filmpodcast. where you can sign up for ad-free episodes and exclusive After Darks.
Thanks so much to everyone who makes the Filmcast possible.